talking a little bit about Relate and how we're different than some of the other therapeutic practices out there. We are a group practice, we're a team, and as the team grows, we've been able to make it so that we have people that are highly trained for all members of a family. So we can see young children, we can see teens and tweens, we can see adults, couples, families, and we have a high trauma slant, meaning that all of the therapists are trained in working with really high traumatic situations like grief and loss, abuse, high conflict divorce, some of these things that come up in life that maybe you're not expecting, and ultimately you need to try to figure out a new way to work through. COVID can even be one of those things for people. You know, I mean, it's been something where whenever you have a new trauma, like COVID has sort of taken over a lot of people's lives, what ends up happening is that it can exacerbate some of the other things that maybe were going on before. So something that you had maybe had in the past that you could avoid, or like maybe you and your spouse or your teens could go do their own thing, COVID has provided people with this really unique opportunity to not be able to leave, and they have to sit in whatever is really bothering them and whatever's going on with their family. And so what we're finding is that people are now in a place after these past couple months, and it doesn't feel like it's quite as an emergency, right? There's still some intimate needs around being safe and being cautious about COVID, but we have a better routine and a structure around our lives, you know, at least to some degree, right? Because it's always changing and shifting. But people are starting to sense like, okay, I need to work on me again.
And that's huge. Like, I'm glad you bring that up. And we'll talk more about the different modalities, the tele meetings and all that stuff, teletherapy. But my question to you is then, has the immediacy of the situation of everyone just being like, just slammed in together, has the immediacy of that in some way kind of, I don't want to say watered down, but made there be less of a stigma, or made people go, you know what, I can't deal with this, I have to go to therapy?
You know, I think one of the pieces that's kind of come up is that the convenience of teletherapy maybe has made a little bit of the stigma go away, because I do think that people are getting used to being on Zoom calls and seeing people through a Zoom medium. And so they can recognize, well, I could do therapy this way and nobody even has to see me or know that I'm going. I don't have to tell my boss I need to take off work early. You know, some of those pieces that might come up in a more typical time aren't coming up as regularly now.
That makes perfect sense. You know what, that like, and I don't mean to go, that makes perfect sense, and then move on. I have to tell you though, I'm excited about you, because here's what's up, Jasmyn. One of the things that has really stuck with me since we met, like, what was it, 5-10 years ago? I'm just kidding, it's like 2 years ago.
Yeah, forever.
Right? Forever ago. What's something that really stuck with me is that you were a performer, and I love that story. That's you hit me where I live. I want to hear like your journey of going from performer to being the artist that you are now, the therapy artist, you know, because like thank you, because like you seem so in line with it. And I just know, like, from my world, like I battle every day, like the need to perform, and I love what I do, but I think about my show all the time. Like, I'm always like, how to make it better. And I know you probably still perform, you probably still sing, but like you seem so integrated and so in alignment. Just watching you talk right now about the kind of great way you're serving people and helping people right now, like, can you walk me through that whole journey of like when it became like, yeah, this is it, man. This is what I do. I'm a fucking therapist. Like, this is how I help people. And we can swear in the show. It's all good.
Yeah. You know, for me, when I was young, I had a lot going on in my life, like a lot of therapists end up having, right? I had a lot of trauma and different things that have happened in my family. And I always found that music and singing was my biggest outlet. And I knew very early on, I remember being 5 and 6 and people saying that I had a really good voice and they wanted me to sing solos. And that was something that really stuck with me, that people would pay attention to me when I sang, right? So I used that as my coping skill for many, many years, not knowing what it was, right? I'd sit and write music. My dad got me this mini organ that just had like 2 octaves and I would play that, and there was just a couple things of sheet music in there, and I memorized every song in there. 3 Coins in a Fountain, who knows that song? It's like from the 40s. Like, I know every song in those 3 books. I know every word. I can still play them. So to me, that was really important to just kind of grow through music. And I did that for a long time. And when I was in high school, I said wholeheartedly, I want to sing. I'm going to perform. I'm going to go be a professional singer. And I decided to go to college first. And I went to DU, University of Denver. And while I was there, I studied music, but I also studied psychology. And I ended up getting my psychology degree, and I had every intention at that point. I saved money and I moved to Chicago, and I was in some shows there. And eventually I did move to New York. And while I was there, I just found I didn't like the environment as much as I hoped I would.
You can say the people. I say it all the time.
You know, it's not just it's the people to some degree, but you know, I loved being in the shows with the people. But what I really didn't like was that feeling, and I'll never forget it. And when I decided I really didn't want to do it, Ron, was when I was in this show, and after the show, I had people that were there that were my friends, right? But then there were agents, and there were people that you were supposed to meet there. And that's the business, right? Is you have to schmooze those people and help them feel like, hey, I was just in this show, and talk to them. And I remember feeling so divided at that point, because I wanted to talk to my family, but I felt like I need to get in another show. You know, you're always looking for the next show. And that's what I think is that golden thread of how people then become a little more shallow in that business, because you can't allow yourself to connect to the people in the show and your family. You have to go for the next show. You have to talk to the casting director. You have to talk to the agents. And I just always felt like it was empty. Like, even when I was in the midst of a show and I'm singing on stage, I'm thinking about my next gig. And I just didn't like that feeling. And I thought, how am I going to sustain this? This doesn't feel authentic to me. And I do think there are a lot of people that really were truly authentic in the business. You know, I had, at the time, that I'm so old that we didn't have, like, you couldn't text, your call time. You had to physically go and sign a sheet to sign in for your time. Now you could just go online and you just pick your time. You don't even have to go down there. I'd go down to 32nd Street while my friend would go up to 57th Street. And then we'd have somebody who would meet if we would be able to do both those calls, and we would have somebody else that would sign us up for the last call of the day at the casting building above McDonald's. So there are all these like places that you had to go back and forth to. And people would help each other out to sign up and do that. And so I really did appreciate that part of the people. And I did feel like there were a lot of people that really wanted to talk to me and get to know me and kind of know what I was about. I felt New York was a very welcoming city. I thought everybody had a story. I mean, I'm sure you have the same impression. It's just people really wanted to get to know you.
I was surprised about that. Like, when I lived there for a little bit, like, just how, because everyone is, especially, like, I say the people, but like in the community, once you're in the community there and you're with your friends, and there, I remember this like beautiful family feel of like everyone helping each other out, going out to dinner together. Like, no one wants to stay in their apartment, so there was this beautiful like synergy and this like holistic, welcoming feeling for sure. But because you're every day you're fighting against the cast, not fighting, but you're like fighting to be seen and heard. Yeah, that creates, I love how you said that you're always on about the next idea. Even Broadway people, like, I remember hearing their stories about, like, you're on stage and you're like, is Law and Order, are they here tonight? Is big film director here tonight? It's always a thing to get you to the next thing. That has to create some kind of like lack mindset and just like a feeling of not enough, right?
Oh yeah, the lack of worth and the value. What is it that makes you valuable? You know, what do you bring to the table is the way they say it. But it really is like, how valuable are you? Can you do tap? I mean, how trained are you in jazz? Have you been on a soap yet? You know, there's like all, like New York has like a culture of value and worth that's different than LA. And I never ended up, I didn't want to, but I didn't go to LA. But I do know people that would come from LA to New York would often say that too. Like, there's such a different sense of worth here and value. What was valuable?
But isn't it funny when you go to those places? Like, I remember feeling like I'm at the end of the world. Like, when I was there, like you're you know, LA or New York, like you're there, especially if you're in the industry, like you're there for a reason, and then there's nowhere else really you can go. So okay, New York to LA for sure, right?
Right.
But once you're in LA, like you feel like you're like, fuck, this is it. Like I'm here now. And then it becomes not about the work anymore, right? Like if you talk about like people in Chicago, like it's always like, what are you working on? Right? Like, oh, I'm doing this and this and that. And I always felt like with LA, it was like, what are you working on? Well, I met this event, I met this producer, I met this agent, it wasn't about the craft anymore, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I get where, like,
No.
who do you know? Yeah.
And how well do you know them, and what are they going to do for you?
What are they going to do for you? This is so not Coloradan, like that mindset, right? So like, were you, was it just devastating? Because if you were like, I always wanted to be a singer and I wasn't a good one. So like, I never, like for me, like I had to earn it like in a different way, where it was like, it wasn't until I was 30 that I started singing. People were like, oh, okay. Like, it's not bad, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it is what it is. And they love me in the community theater. But for you as someone who innately like was good and you did the work, like you went after it and you pursued it, like was there a realization like, oh, I don't have to do what I love doing, what I'm naturally good at as a career? Or was it just pure devastation where you're like, this sucks, this is not what I signed up for, I'm here, I made it happen, I manifested, and now I'm miserable. Like, what do I do now? I'm lost. Like, what was that turning point?
Yeah, that's such a great concept and question, because that is something that I actually work in a lot with my clients too, because I think this is something that we are not really allowed to talk about as a culture. And when I don't know somebody well and they hear that I went to New York, the automatic assumption is like, well, you didn't make it, you know? And then that's what that piece feels like to me too, you know, that feeling of like, ugh, maybe I didn't stick it out long enough. Maybe I should have gone after it more. Maybe I should have really like just put everything into it. I didn't put enough into it. But the fact of it is that I didn't like so many pieces of it, that the parts that I liked just didn't overrun those other pieces, you know? And by being a therapist, you know, and having what I have now, it all feels like I like more than I don't like at this point. And I do remember, and I don't think I'll ever forget it, I doubt my dad remembers it, but I had a conversation with my dad, and I remember I was walking up to Central Park, and I remember deciding to broach the subject that I maybe don't want to live here anymore. And I was nervous to do it because I could feel that I hadn't gone out. My goal was to be on Broadway, you know, and I said, like, that's what I'm going to do. And I hadn't done that. And I remember feeling like, what's he going to say if I say I don't want to stay here? And I gave a lot of reasons why I didn't want to stay. First, right? Like, it kind of started with like, you know, and it wasn't even that it was hard. See, because that was the thing. I never wanted to walk away because it was hard, you know, because I don't walk away from hard things. And I think that's where my worth comes into play, is if I was walking away just because it was hard, then I was walking away for the wrong reason. And so I really had to sit and stay and be there until I knew that that's not why I was walking away. And I do know that some of the pieces that I didn't like then, I often think about this. If I moved there today as a 20-something, I think some of those pieces have really shifted just with the invent of technology. You know, there's just so many ways that technology has helped just the craft, you know, itself. Just you can watch YouTube videos and stuff on certain actors, but Yeah.
Well, and two, yeah, like not sorry to cut you up, but like,
Yeah.
and I think too, just in terms of like, so I was there in 2003. And I mean, also just in terms of how we treat each other in the industry or how we treat each other as performers, vastly different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
People are much kinder. I think the way that even people up top, since Harvey Weinstein and all that stuff, I think as women, like women are probably treated much better all around, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. Yeah, just the awareness around being more inclusive. And so I do think that it would be different now. But at the time, I just felt like, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to have kids here? Am I going to move to LA? Am I just going to, how long am I going to wait to get on Broadway? And if I feel that way, am I doing the right thing because I may never get on Broadway? You know, am I only doing this because I said I was going to get on Broadway? And I just really became disenchanted with it. Honestly, I felt like I need to do something else. This isn't what I hoped for, not what I wanted. And I'm not going to keep doing it just because I said I was going to do it.
How many people in relationships that are breaking up do you know that say the exact same thing?
Yeah.
Right? We set out to do, and that's so true, I think, of so many people that like in the arts, and especially like when you're in the arts, you spend so much of your life, right? Like fighting your parents or fighting naysayers or people that like you didn't make it, and you're like, no, I have to prove to them. But it's seldom is it about like, you know, I have one more show and I really want to play this kind of character. Or I want to direct this kind of thing. It's not about, it's I have to get that belt, like that loop on the belt or the notch on the belt. I have to get the Broadway, right? And so you get to, I know some people that got that gig and they were like, this is like corporate. It's like working at McDonald's. You know what I mean? It's like you're in a drafty building. Like you're stuck in this like without windows and you just sit there for 8 shows a week. Like it's miserable. It's like slave labor, you know, but like but I set out to go, I'm going to do it. Yeah. And I bet people in compromising situations that come to you, right, that are like, no, well, I'm sticking it out. Yeah, no, it's abusive. It's horrible. I feel less than, I don't have any value, but like, no, it's okay. We're going to stick it out.
Yeah. Cause I said I was going to do it. Yeah, for sure. And it's too bad. You know, I think that having drive and setting goals like that, I do believe it's a good thing, right? To have an expectation of your own work and what you should value and what you should go for and strive for. But I also think at the same time, you know, you need to constantly be evaluating yourself. You need to be checking in with where you are, who you are, what you want, and if it's meeting those expectations, you know. And at some point, for me at least, I really felt like this isn't right. But within that same journey, then I had to figure out what was right. And that was hard.
Can I ask you a dirty, like, this is my favorite dirty question ever, like to ask. It's so inappropriate. It's going to make you uncomfortable. I'm sorry that we have to go here. But how do you then articulate in that moment? How do you articulate what you want? I'm just kidding. It's not that dirty of a question. But how do you articulate want? And like, do you work with clients? Because this is my favorite thing. I'm obsessed with this when I work with clients. So I work with a lot of coaches and therapists on like how they articulate their process to prospective clients and prospective patients. And so everyone has a want, right? Like everyone has a way of working around what. Like as a coach, you work with people on their vision, on their goals. For you, like, does want become a driving force for your work with them? And then how do you articulate that when you're in a place where you're just devastated? You're like, this is what I thought I wanted. Does that make sense? I'm asking you like 3 questions at once, but.
Well, I think that for people, we have to determine what we really need versus what we want, you know, and what are our habits, you know, because a lot of times we name our habits and then we say they're what we want, but we're just doing that because it's out of a habit. We've just decided that's what we're supposed to be doing and that's what we want, right? And so it doesn't really reflect what you want, it reflects what you've done and what you've become comfortable with. So I kind of think naming that first is sort of important for people as they're shifting.
And then how do you, then that's really cool because it's, right, you're like habitually, this is all I know. So especially when you're, I think when you're up against the wall, right, you resort to what you know.
Right. Mm-hmm.
As an Enneagram 4, wherever I am, I'm not somewhere else, you know. So how did you, in that moment, how did you discover therapy?
I didn't in that moment. I wish it was that simple. And I think that that's the misnomer, right? Is that people think like, oh yeah, like I'll go from this, I'll do that. It'll just easily line up. I'll know what I want and we'll just move forward. And that is not the case. I did not feel that way. I had up days, I had down days, I had days I regretted my choice, I had days that I embraced it, thought this is the best idea ever. My now husband and I went and ran a bed and breakfast for a while. We thought maybe we would buy that and potentially do like party planning, wedding planning, that sort of thing. I thought about just not doing anything, just deciding that I was like going to be a stay-at-home mom. I'm not going to have a career outside of this. If I get a different job, that's fine, but I'm not going to go for any sort of career. I want to be a mom. I thought about just doing the community plays and that sort of stuff and just becoming like a local actress and doing that. I thought about a lot of things and honestly, that's the part that I think people forget. And that's where I think people can embrace the therapeutic process, is that you don't have consistent drive and wants. You know, you're going to have days where you feel like, am I making the right choice here? You know, and you're going to go back and forth. And some days you're going to be like, wow, this was great. I totally should do this. This is such a good idea. And then some days you're going to be like, ooh, I don't know if I should do that, you know?
So yeah, like that's, you know, I think that's probably not like people think, there's like a simple solution, like a magic bullet, right? They can just take care of all that. But yeah, it's cool and affirming, might I add. It's super affirming to hear that. Like I trust you more for going through that process of internally kind of weeding out and trying things and going, what am I gravitating towards? What's not working? And then taking that time to figure out who you are and what you're about. Because like if you're gonna help me as a therapist, like I want you to have that depth,
Yeah.
that palette of colors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then,
I always say I've lived many lives,
which is relatable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I love on your promo video or your intro video on your website. You talk about like, you call the whole thing relate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know if that's in the same context as relatability, but I was like, I relate to that, you know.
Yep.
So then, what was the ingredients that like were, you know, like I've done all this, I've done that. Now I'm gonna go and help people figure their shit out.
So at that point, we had moved to California and we were in the San Diego area at that point. And I had always really been drawn to the idea of helping kids. I had, you know, my share of stuff going in my own childhood. And I always felt like there was room for people to be more empathetic and really give kids a chance to talk through what they're going through in a way that was maybe less authority driven, you know, where they connected with them on their level. And I liked the idea of doing that, but I wasn't quite sure how to do it. And so initially I started working at a residential treatment facility for teens just to see what I thought about it. And it was hard. There are a lot of things about it I liked and a lot of things I didn't, but I learned a lot. And I ended up leaving there being the program coordinator. And I did basically every job there. And in the meantime, I had decided that I wanted to be a therapist, but I remember grappling with the question that I think a lot of people do, is that can you really help people change? I had to decide if by me going to school and ultimately, you know, spending time, energy, and money on getting this education, would I ultimately be able to help people change? And if I could, then I felt like that was worth it for me. But if I couldn't, I felt like I should just go do something else, you know, be the wedding planner. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that. I really did. Before I went to grad school. I remember having a lot of conversations with people about change. I talked to a lot of people that I thought maybe had changed some in their lives and what drove them to feel that they could change. I also thought a lot about myself and how I had decided, so wholeheartedly to change, and what were things I had changed and what were things that I hadn't changed. That's the other part. And I decided, ultimately, obviously, I decided that I think people can change because that's why I'm here. And when I decided that, it was kind of like a weight lifted off of me. Like, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to do this.
How do people change? This is huge. I love this. This is like, oh, this is so juicy, right? I'm obsessed with change. I have to change all the time. Like,
Yeah.
I try to be liked, so you got to change when you're,
Mm-hmm.
None of that is healthy, what I just said, but I'm just saying it's been a lifelong.
Well, it's true. There's a lot of change that comes from a lot of different sources. And that's the thing, is that there's not really just one way to change, but some people are forced to change because of their environment, right? Their environment makes them have to change for whatever reason. A family member dies, suddenly you have to change, those are some drivers that really force change. But that idea of internal change, I actually didn't embrace it for adults right away. And that's why I had initially said I was going to work with kids, because I thought, you know what, I think kids can change, but I'm not sure adults can. And I laid a ton of focus for myself with working on kids, because I thought that's the surest way to create change, is to work with kids. Kids are malleable. They'll see you as somebody who influences their life. You can connect with them. Little did I know at that point how much their parents are involved. And slowly but surely, that became part of my work, is working with parents as well. And that's where the idea of Relate came into play, is that I feel that even if a child wants to change, you have to help the system change, meaning their parents need to be able to change. Their parents' relationship needs to be able to change. The family needs to be able to change. And that's why I created Relate as a space, because I want someone to be able to come in here and say, I want to change, but I don't think I can change unless my mom changes. And then as the therapist, I can be the advocate for that and say, you know what, your son is working really hard here to shift, but he sees you need to do that too. Are you willing to do that? And if they say yes, I try to make it as easy for them as possible. They can come at the same time. They can have their own separate sessions, but they're there together. And hopefully through that work, that desire that the son had will then become the mom's desire to change too. And a lot of times it does.
And that's much more active, right? That feels like a proactive changing towards something versus changing away from something, or you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That seems like it's earned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, empowering,
I do. What's cool is I have to reflect, like, I hope it's okay. Like, it's so badass to see how you changed. And I don't mean that like a cheesy talk show. Well, it seems like you've changed, but
Yeah.
It's cool to see how you, going from talking about like showbiz to like how just like you're like how passionate you are about change. And it doesn't seem that it seems you are passionate about the changing, like change that comes from within them on their own terms. It doesn't seem like you are a narcissist that is trying to, you're like, I need to change people for the sake of it, right?
Yeah.
So you've gone on this journey, and then it's really cool to watch you talk about it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's big. I think that, for me, I started with working with the kids, and they hold so much power in the family if you give them a voice. I just have had so many sessions with parents where they've said, I didn't realize that my kid was noticing all of this. I didn't understand what they were feeling, what they were seeing, because one of the biggest ways we change is through those love relationships, through people that we care about, and we see what they need and we want to figure out how to give it to them. That from your own child, I'm sure. When seeing your daughter, it's like, how do I get her what she needs? And sometimes that's a shift in you. And if we give that kid the space to be able to tell their parents that, and they feel safe and supported while they do it, and we can give them the words and the tools to do that, whether it's through play therapy or through expressive arts therapy, sand tray, or just even talking, you know, and giving them some relaxation piece where they feel relaxed enough to share, that parent can hear that, and that's huge.
It is huge. And it's, you know, I catch myself a lot too. My daughter's 4 going on 25 right now.
Yeah.
And it's astounding to me how much she's right. Like from like little things like it's going to rain to, can you get me that thing that's upstairs on the left? And you know, like, it's astounding. And I catch my ego. I mean, I try not to do it anymore, but I catch my egos. I caught my ego sometimes, a lot of times going, no, babe, no, it's not. I know better. And I didn't, you know? And so I'm like, it is astounding how intuitive, and when without obstructing that voice to come out, like her intuition is right. Like and she has so much to say, and you're right, she picks up so much. It is astounding. I love too how you're talking about like this notion of like changing from within the family dynamic through the kid, and letting that kind of blossom out into the rest of the people involved. Because you're right, it's all about, I mean, for the most part, it's all about the kids, one way or another, you know, right? Yeah. What are some of the coolest, most like transformational changes that you've seen within your practice that have worked out like that, like some super success stories?
Oh, we've had, truthfully, that's like such a great part of this work, right? Is, you know, we'll get some cases that don't go great, right? Like everything, like in life. But then you have to remember that those ones that aren't going well, on the other side, there's somebody who you sit with their family week after week, and they're angry, and someone's yelling, and it's super uncomfortable, and no one wants to talk about the problem, and you slowly get them in a place where they can talk, and you're opening it up to everybody, and they start to connect and feel it. And then suddenly the family laughs, and all of them laugh together. And before, when it was like closed off and they didn't like it, like none of them would laugh, you know, like one of them would try to make a joke, like the mom or something, be like, oh, and yeah, and Peter did this. And then people would be like, no, we're not laughing at that, you know, like, but then once they start to kind of connect and feel good, it's like, oh yeah, they laugh about it. You're like, you sit there and you're like, yep, this is happening. I can see it. That's a really fun one.
That's a huge win. Yeah.
Yeah. I like.
So by the time people come to you, do they have a stigma typically?
Around therapy?
Yeah.
Yes and no. We like to say at Relate that we are the next stop if you've already had therapy and it didn't work. So sometimes those people, yes, because they've already tried it, and for whatever reason, you know, they didn't connect with the therapist, or they felt like they connected, but maybe they were too much of a friend and they didn't really provide them with more direct feedback. There are a lot of reasons why people go into therapy and it doesn't work. And then there are reasons kind of on the other side where there's a stigma around just going in the first place. Like, I don't need it. She needs it. He needs it. That comes up quite a bit, especially in couples work. That's a place where it's like their fault, not mine. So there's some of that does happen, but you know, I do think by the time they're reaching out to Relate, and I take all of the calls that come to Relate myself, and I go through and talk to everybody myself initially and try to match them with the right therapist. And so I get a little window into how they're doing and what could help them and what hasn't helped in the past. And I truly think at that point, they just want somebody to listen and hear them and then help them move forward. You know, they just want help.
Well, and it seems like too, the way you do it is much more like customized to the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like when we did, like, I love therapy. I'm obsessed with therapy. Like I said, I work with therapists, I work with coaches all day long, like as clients, and then, you know, I pick up some tips. Like I'll be like, well, I'll be like, by the way, here's what I'm going through. Is that normal? You know? But when we did it, we went to 2 sessions of couples therapy, as like we knew that it was like, you know, gonna be the ending. And I remember being like, asking the therapist, I was like, do people typically get out of this? I'm like, we're not mad at each other or anything, but like, we've worked through a lot of stuff. Like I've admitted to being a jerk about certain things, and she's an Enneagram 1, so like
Ones and fours.
Yeah, she 1s and 4s. Yeah, it's not. I'm like, it's really, and Gemini, Pisces, like it's just not, like, it's nobody's fault at that point. But she's like, yeah, typically people work through it and stuff. And I remember it was our second session, and she asked us like a question, and it felt like a very generic question, but it really got me. And I was like, oh, you know what? We did the best we could in the moment. We picked the right person for the right time, but it wasn't a long-term solution. It was, we did our best, and we continue to support each other through our development, but it wasn't the right fit. And but I remember that thinking like, man, that one question, had she not, and it felt so generic. I'm like, had she not asked, it felt so prescribed, she's probably like, and now we're at this point in the session, so I'm going to ask this question. That's how it felt to me. I don't know. It didn't feel itemized. It didn't feel customized. It didn't feel like she was really listening to like our different styles. It felt like it was just like, well, this is what we do. And so I'm like, had she not asked that one question, I wonder if things would have turned out different,
Yeah, isn't that, wow.
Because it wasn't personal.
And that's what keeps me up at night, right there. Because I hope, and I say this in these conversations with these people on the phone, it's like, I want you to know, our therapists want to know when this doesn't feel right. I would much prefer as a therapist that you would say, that feels like a generic question, and I just don't feel like that's an authentic question for us, or it's not relevant for us. And I would like to have the tables turned a little bit where I have to sit in there and say, okay, well, there's a reason that you're paying me, you came to see me, you're putting your faith and energy into this. And I will say, another one of the things I say is, I'm not a thanks for sharing therapist. I will not sit in a space with you and just listen to you talk and talk and talk and say, thanks for sharing. I won't do it. That's not why you're there. If you want to just go sit and talk to somebody, just get a stuffed animal. And just talk and talk. Like they're actually affirming ones. That you could probably get one now. You push a button and it'll say, thanks for sharing, right? I'm not going to do that. If you're coming to me, you're going to work, and it's going to be a hard 50 minutes. And I hope you're not going back to work after it, because you're going to be thinking about it for a couple hours, right? And when you come to me, that car ride is going to be a really reflective car ride, because you're going to be thinking about it. It's not easy.
Jasmyn, I love you. You're great. Why is it not easy? This is my second to last question. I have 2 more questions. Why is it not easy though? Right? Why is change not easy?
Oh, well, because why is change not easy is because when we feel like we know something, we cannot accept that maybe something else could be better or could be worse, right? Like it could be better, but it could be worse. And if it's going to be worse, then I don't want to change this. I would rather do what I know than risk it getting worse, risk feeling worse. I had there was like a meme the other day that I saw that was like, we so avoid the feelings that we're already feeling, right? Like, like people say like, I don't want to feel anxious. And it's like, but you're feeling a bunch of anxiety about feeling anxious. So aren't you already feeling it? Like, I don't want to feel sad, right? Part of it is that we take a problem that's this big, right? It's in your head. You're constantly thinking about it. Comes up with everything. There's triggers, perseveration. You're stuck in it. You see it everywhere you go. You see it in books, movies, with whomever. We take that thing and we slowly bring it down to a manageable size in your life. But you know what that means? When you're in session with me for those 45 to 50 minutes, it's this big, right? I'm making it this big, so outside it gets like this.
Sorry, and you can examine it, right? Like that way you can, if you don't blow it up, you can't look at all the different sides of it.
But you're already blowing it up. And that's where I think that people don't recognize the idea of change is that you already don't see how often you're sitting in your own problem. It's just become such a part of your day. Being irritable, let's just take that. If you're like, well, it's not really a problem for me. And then you and I start to talk through your day and we see all the times that you were irritable. And then that irritability led to disconnection with others, led to having a shift in a situation that maybe you didn't like, led just to increasing concerns over the course of the day, where your irritability made somebody else in your life more irritable, which then made you more irritable, having it grow. If we can look at that one issue that you say, well, gosh, it's not really a problem to me, but everyone else doesn't like it, right? If we can start to examine why maybe they think it's an issue, you might actually see for you, you're thinking about it this much during the day, and that's where the idea of change then becomes relevant is, oh yeah, I have an awareness around how much I'm actually doing it. My awareness has led me to see the negatives of it. I would rather sit in the discomfort of therapy, where for those 50 minutes we examine it, than sit in the discomfort of what it's bringing to my life.
See, that's what I'm glad you said that. Like, because I love talking about my problems. Like, I love working things out and understanding like the systemic cause, or like trailing it back to when I was 7, or like, and I think there's great value in that. Like, I think there's so much, because how do you change it if you don't know where it roots from, where it like grew from, right?
Yeah.
Like, I want to know why am I doing this? Why am I falling into this pattern? So I'm glad you, because like that is the thing, right? When people are like, they'll go like, and again, I love all the different modalities, not all of them, but like there's so many great forms of personal development. But some things, like you said, like some fits are better than others, right? But I love that. I love how you just kind of charted that progression of how to take an issue, how to blow it up, examine it, and in that 50 minutes, examine it to the point where you're going to feel so much better on the other side of it. Like, where you can see a vision of, like you said, like bad or worse, or I mean, good or bad, you can see a good version of it, right?
Right.
Not feeling it. That's badass. I'm not just saying that.
But I want to say, though, and caution, the way you have to get there is through trust. And that's the relationship with the therapist. The modality it's valid and it makes a difference from the standpoint of the therapeutic work. I, as a therapist, need to know my direction. But you as a client need to know that you trust me, we have good rapport, and that I understand you. The relationship that you have with me has been proven time and time again to be far and away the most important component of therapy. That relationship with the therapist is the backbone for you getting that work done.
Yo, you're perfect. Like, you still got it. You still got the chops. That was such a great close. That was awesome. Okay. That being said, if people, by people, I mean me, when I want to start working with you with my shit, how do people connect with you? How do people get a hold of you?
So Relate Family Therapy has a really extensive website. I want to make it easy for people when they feel stressed and overwhelmed to just kind of get on there, and you can look through the therapists, you can call, you can email, and everyone always gets a hold of me. So you get to talk about what's going on, and then and some people are more comfortable just emailing. So we do have like an email sheet that they can do, and that way I can get an idea of what's going on for them. And then we'll match them up with the best fit. Right now we are doing both the teletherapy and in-person sessions. And all of our offices are set up for the client, not the therapist. So you'll come in and you'll go to the office that is most appropriate for you. So if it's a teen, we have a teen space, we have a young child space. We have rooms that are just set up for couples work and for family work.
Again, that's so cool, because it's like you're really taking into account what is the comfort level of the individual, how to personalize the experience for that person.
Yeah, it's about them. I don't want them to come in and feel like, they've got all sorts of like, the McDonald's bags and, people's paperwork and books piled up sky high. I want them to come in and it feels clean and it feels comfortable, and it's their space to relax and kind of get started, because it is hard work, and I want to acknowledge that for them right out of the gate.
Jasmyn, you're great. Okay, well, that was it. Another episode of the RBJ Talk Show. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you for it's all right. Like, thank you for coming on, Jasmyn. You're great. Like,
I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Virtual hug.
That's right.